Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today, once again, we are going to be hitting the topic of roster building. Recently, we did quite a few videos on Galactic Legends and how to build them, what's the best priority, why you should stop going after one to go after another. And while that was really cool, we did get a lot of comments about how people who are in a smaller place in the roster where they only have access to maybe one Galactic Legend or maybe zero were having this other type of battle about how to spend their get one currency. And while at first this might seem like not that important, it's just like one more shop, one more character you have to farm up. It's really not. It's actually a very critical point, especially in the mid and beginning game, of how to build your roster, because it's such a large bottleneck that hasn't really been loosened up at all throughout time. Whereas on the nodes, we have accelerated shards. Get is still a pretty tight commodity as far as things go. So let's go ahead and kind of define our terms. What are we talking about? We are talking specifically today about the get one currency that you primarily, not specifically, but primarily get from the territory battles. I think Hoth actually gives the most out of all of them. You can also find it like randomly in other places. I think it was in the GAC boxes at one point. It was also in Heroic Sith Ray. There's some other places it's scattered around. But at the end of the day, it's a very limited resource that we don't just get a ton of to go off of. And regardless pretty much of what you want to do, you really need to be focusing first and foremost on characters. There's only 4 characters that can use get one, and they're kind of in 2 separate categories. You have Wampa and you have Hoda. Wampa and Hoda can both be taken from 0 stars all the way up to 7 stars purely with get. Wampa does have another place he can be got by buying or by getting him through the bounty mission that comes up like once every 2 months or something like that. It's really not a way that you're going to be able to max him out though, and I think they also both have packs, but basically we're grouping the 2 of them together because they are needed to get all the way from 0 to 7 stars. Whereas General Skywalker and Darth Malak, while they're unlocked similarly as to Hoda's Wampa at 5 stars, you actually get that through their journey guide events rather than having to go from straight 0. And again, the reason why this ends up being really important is because they're all going to be a part of some of the best teams right now in the game that aren't necessarily a part of Galactic Legend teams. And it looks like I got a little bit lost here in the journey guide, but yeah, so Giant Luke, Gas, Malik, they're all in this tier 5, which is really the best characters sitting out there before you actually get into the actual Galactic Legends here. That being said, let's talk about what are things that we need to consider and what, in my opinion, is the best order and how they need to be done. So if we go over here, well, I already kind of have them sorted out in some extra details. So Gas is going to be the one that we're going to want to prioritize the most, and I'll get into reasons why. And I know there's a really big argument, not necessarily for Giant Luke, but for Wampa, especially for those who are JEC focused. But we're going to start on Gas, and the reason why is when you're building a roster, when you go after a legendary, whether it be for Get, whether it be for Galactic Legend or some other character, you need to not only focus on the character, but on the requirements and what that is going to do for your overall roster. And the characters that you are going to build alongside Gas before you actually even dump the get currency into them are all really good characters. I don't know if there's another legendary on any level in the game right now who every single one of the Rex is a great option. You can see here in his final tier, he requires Asajj Ventress, as well as B1, B2, Magna, and Droideka. These middle 3 are still very great endgame characters. I use them every single GAC under General Grievous. Droideka has some uses here and there. I've used him a ton recently with Maul teams, but especially in the mid game when you're trying to build more teams, he does fine under like a Newt Dooku type of deal. Asajj Ventress, Night Sisters, not one of the best teams anymore, but one very cheap team that is very accessible in the beginning of the game. And then even the tier 2 ones, these are all, I would argue to say, premium characters. Padme, GK, and Ahsoka are still the meta if you don't include Datacrons. They're all in that JMK squad, and they all provide a whole lot of value there. Shock is versatile. Again, middle game, end game, doesn't really matter. She can go with clones before you have Gas, which is super cool. But on the other hand, she can also go with JMK. She can also go with Giant Luke. She can even go with like Troopers to cleanse them. She has a ton of uses. Repeal as well, he can go into a ton of homes. He has like 5 different factions that he synergizes with. All you have to do is pick one. Even the fleet option is pretty darn good. You know, you don't even necessarily need to max your mace if you're not wanting to do that for whatever reason. You can go right after your negotiator as well as the rest of these. The one big issue, and actually, yeah, you probably can't just do Mace here because Negotiator will take you longer if you're going for this first. But yeah, that pretty much is the reason why he's coming in first. Giant Luke is a great character. Malik is a great character as well, but his requirements just really beat out Giant Luke's. And let's go ahead. We're going to talk about priority number 2, and also one thing we need to consider before we just completely tear the band-aid off and everyone goes in the comments to roast me because of Wampa. So while General Skywalker has the best list of requirements, Wampa himself as requirements has a stupid amount of value. And I'm going to argue that maybe if you are having issues getting all of Gas's requirements up, 10 characters, some of them really need to be at relics even for the event, at least 1 or 2 of them do. You might have time to not necessarily get Wampa to 7 stars, but maybe you can at least get him to 5. So here's what I'm proposing. This is going to be the ultimate list. Gas is going to be the first one you're going to 7 stars. But if you have an Omicron burning hole in your pocket, if you're having issues getting the rest of the Rex up for General Skywalker, detour a little bit just to Wampa so that you can 5-star him, throw on the Omicron, get him to gear 11, give him the Zeta he wants, and then run with him. And he should still actually be able to beat a good amount of teams. Not as much as he'll beat, obviously, at Relics. But if you look here at our get cost that we have already spelled into the image here, 39,000 get versus trying to stop and getting the 89,000. That's a huge difference of just getting in there, getting to a stopping point. Hoda can wait entirely, and then you can go and resume your General Skywalker farm and just kind of be done with that. So Wampa 5 stars, Gas next. Back to finish your Wampa, get Hoda up, go after Giant Luke, and then once you have Giant Luke, you can start looking at some really big options like Jedi Master Luke and Jabba. They're in here. They're obviously not. You don't technically need to get one to get them, but at the same time, it's impossible to do it without these 2 characters here who require it. So Giant Luke, I guess we'll address this just slightly. We mentioned how Gas has a lot of really great characters, or only has great characters in his lineup. And when we pull up Giant Luke is probably the best event in the entire game, if we're being honest, that's cool. But there are just a handful of requirements in here that, different from Gas, are garbage. Like, you can put them on a defensive team, but they're never going to hold, or if they do, whatever other team you're going to put there was going to hold as well. Rolo, Lando, and Captain Han are the big 3. I guess we could probably go back. Actually, no, it doesn't. Oh yeah, it does show them individually here in the front. Those ones are going to be really hard to swallow. I know Relic 3 isn't that high, but at the same time, I would much rather have a Gear 12 Droideka, a Gear 12 Asajj, and who's like the 3rd worst for Gas? The 3rd worst for Gas is probably Magna Guard, which is a pretty darn good character. And yeah, avoiding these 3 is pretty much what we're going after when we're trying to build a roster. When you're going after General Skywalker, you get part of a Night Sister team, you get most of a Grievous team, minus Grievous, you get tools that can be used in a new team, you get a Padme team. There's so many things that go into that I really think he is going to be the optimal choice when looking at them. And then in last, and I guess least, is going to be Malik. And this isn't anything personal against Malik. The Darth Revan, the Sith Empire team is very good. It's actually quite amazing right now with Malgus. But that's really kind of the kicker. For not only his requirements fall into a worse position than Jedi Knight Luke's do. If we want to open up that, a lot of these characters aged very, very poorly. Darth Revan, Bastila Shan Fallen, amazing characters. Cander's pretty good under a Maul squad. He does a lot of work there. HK Karth, Juhani. I mean, these are garbage tier characters. And I know Juhani has a place in TW, so we can put an asterisk on her garbage comment. But I'm sorry, HK, you have like no place in the game at this point. Like, you're filler at best. Karth, I don't think we need to even make comments on. And then Zalbar and T3 actually have a few places they can go, but they're not super versatile. You kind of have to give them some other things that they want. Like, T3 only really has a home in Sortie, unless you're doing GG Nuke, which I guess is an option. These 3 are good, but again, similar to Giant Luke, you have a lot of good characters, but you also just have some, again, sorry, Karth, garbage tier characters that when you're wanting to build a roster from a very low point is not exactly what you're looking for. And on top of that, the Darth Revan team, the Sith Empire teams, their overall floor, or rather, sorry, their overall ceiling for what teams they can beat comes out just a little bit lower than both what Giant Luke and what General Skywalker can be. With Malgus, they're amazing. They're very, I think, objectively better than both Giant Luke and Gas teams. But at the same time, Malgus is not at all friendly for anyone who hasn't been in the end game. If you have him, you can kind of ignore everything I just said, and you could probably push even Malak up on this list. But I imagine if you have Malgus, you have to have something else in here already. I mean, I'm sure that it kind of exists, and if you're out there, leave me a comment. But that is going to be it for today. Again, reminding that our overall goal here is get Wampa to 5 stars, throw on his Omicron, get him to gear 11, give him some good mods so that he can be able to take out some decent teams. He's not going to be able to solo everything at 5 stars, but especially if you're a very small account like a 1-2 million GP, that's a great option to do. Next up, get Gas and finish him. We talked about his requirements being really good. He's really good in PvP. One other thing that I should have mentioned that I didn't mention before, why we want to go all in on Gas before we want to go all in on Wampa. Wampa is really only good in GC. We've actually had some fun with him at Relics in the Dark Side Territory battles, but a lot of teams can kind of do things there. Gas is really important, not only in Light Side GOTB, but also in Conquest. If you don't have a single Galactic Legend, the fact that you can have Gas just tank hits when he's standing, your debuff data disc can do something really cool before he sits down, and the team dies before he even has to stand up. That's gonna do way more than, say, Wampa is. It's not just about overall GC viability, but it's about roster building and getting your roster to a point where it's getting more resources and more things are happening so that you're able to get more characters and build up faster. And then, yeah, next up is going back and finishing Hoda to be able to get Giant Luke. You don't necessarily have to choose between Jedi Master Luke and Malak. They obviously don't. There's not really a lot of crossover after you've already unlocked Jedi Knight Luke. Jabba is also an option, I guess. We're going to have to explore him further. Haven't put a whole lot of thought into him, but Giant Luke's a requirement, so there he's sitting. And then Malak, again, good character, good team. But when looking at overall requirements, overall viability, and the awkward question of Malgus bringing him to his full potential, that's kind of where it stands. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. I know that I don't really have that much of a newer game account, so I might be missing something. But thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and as always, stay awesome.